The Korean drama titled 18 Again sees a married couple in their late 30s on the brink of divorce. Hong Dae Young still loved his wife and didn't want to divorce her. However, Da Jung's choice was irrevocable. But one fateful night gave Dae Young another chance to make things right. Dae Young and Da Jung were high school lovers. Da Jung was the school's student broadcaster, while Dae Young was the popular jock who loved basketball almost as much as he loved Da Jung. Their sweet romance gradually changed after that one fateful day when Dae Young was forced to choose between his lover and his future career as a basketball player. It was an important game for Dae Young. There were scouts from different universities watching the game. And Dae Young had to be at his best so he would be given a chance at a scholarship and a career in basketball. But before the game started, Da Jung appeared, and a happy Dae Young approached his girlfriend. Da Jung seemed nervous and crestfallen, which didn't go unnoticed by Dae Young, who asked her what was wrong. And Da Jung dropped the bomb. Da Jung told Dae Young that she was pregnant, but knowing how important basketball is to Dae Young, Da Jung let Dae Young focus on basketball. During the game, Dae Young couldn't focus. His mind kept going back to his lover, who was now walking home alone. Standing in the middle of the game, Dae Young finally decided what was more important to him. He ran after Da Jung, who was surprised when she saw him. There, Dae Young told Da Jung that she and their baby were his future. 18 years later, it seems like every choice they have made together in the past has been nothing but a mistake. Since Dae Young ran out in the middle of a game, he lost his chance to get a scholarship and become a successful basketball player. He couldn't finish school and had to start working different jobs at such a young age so he could sustain his family. It was the same for Da Jung, who had to give up on becoming a broadcaster due to her early pregnancy. Life became so hard for the couple. Their fights became more frequent, and Dae Young started developing bad habits that Da Jung absolutely abhors. The regret of having lost the chance to achieve their dreams became a painful baggage that they always had to carry on their shoulders, therefore stopping them from bringing back the same sweet romance they once had. Not only is Dae Young and Da Jung's marriage failing, but their children, Shia and Shiwoo, have also become very distant from them, especially from Dae Young. Dae Young's family is falling apart right before his eyes. But he can't do anything about it. So when he learned about a promotion, Dae Young was excited and even bragged to his children about it, thinking that it would be a good enough reason for Da Jung to stay with him and fix their family. But then he found out that he actually wasn't the one being promoted, but a coworker who hadn't been working in the company as long as Dae Young. To make things even worse, Dae Young learned that he was being relocated to the Busan branch. Dae Young refused to go to Busan because it would make it even harder for him to convince his wife not to divorce him. But his boss didn't want to listen. Having had enough of the obvious mistreatment he was receiving, Dae Young decided to just quit. Da Jung wasn't doing any better. She, too, was fired from her job because her age didn't fit her line of work. That night, Dae Young visited Da Jung to tell her that he didn't want to get divorced, but Da Jung just ignored his words and went inside their home. Dae Young went back to Saram High School, where he and Da Jung used to go. He sneaked into the basketball court and remembered the first time he asked Da Jung out. He then shot a ball into the hoops, silently wishing that he could go back to the start if the ball got in, which it did. Concurrently, there was lightning, and the moon was covered by dark clouds. The basketball court's light flickered once, and on the spot that the 36-year-old Dae Young was standing on now stood an 18-year-old Dae Young. Dae Young didn't realize that his appearance had turned back to when he was 18 and bought alcohol in a convenience store, where he found out Shi-ah was working. He nagged at his daughter, but Shi-ah was just creeped out because she didn't know he was her father because of his appearance. When Dae Young saw his reflection in the mirror, he immediately went back to his best friend's house and called out his name. Just like Shi-ah, Go Dok-jin didn't recognize his best friend either. And the two had an epic and dramatic battle using Dok-jin's collections. Dok-jin only stopped his attacks when Dae Young hit his head on the back of a chair and lost consciousness. When Dok-jin looked at a picture of him and Dae Young when they were still 18, he realized that the young man was actually Dae Young. When Dae Young regained consciousness, the two of them went to Saram High School's basketball court, where Dae Young changed into his 18-year-old self. They realized that Dae Young must have gotten back to his younger self because he wished he could go back before shooting the ball. Dok-jin asked Dae Young what he wanted to do now that he was back to his younger self, and when Dae Young looked at the hoops, he remembered his love for basketball and decided that he wanted to play the game again. He asked Dok-jin to pretend to be his father so he could attend Saram High School and play basketball again. The next day, Dae Young prepared for his new journey as his 18-year-old self and completely forgot to meet Da Jung at the courthouse for their first settlement meeting. Da Jung was upset because of this, but that quickly changed into happiness when she read a text from JBC telling her that she had passed the written exam to become a JBC anchor. The next day, Dae Young and Dok Jin went to Saram High School with fake documents so Dae Young could enroll as a student named Go Woo Young. On his first day of school, Woo Young/Dae Young introduced himself in front of the class and realized that he was in the same class as Xia. Among the class, Woo Young also recognized Ji Ho, Xia's childhood best friend. Later on, Woo Young excused himself so he could answer the phone as Da Jung was calling him. He made up an excuse that he was working in Busan, so he couldn't attend the settlement meeting. After his short talk with Da Jung, Woo Young went to the restroom, where he heard a knock coming from one of the cubicles. The student inside the cubicle asked Woo Young to open the door. And Woo Young realized that the student was being bullied. He opened the cubicle door and learned that the bullied student was his own son, Shi-woo. Woo Young was angry but didn't show it to Shi-woo. Instead, he introduced himself as Dok Jin's son and followed Shi-woo to the cafeteria. He learned that Shi-woo's bullies are a student named Ja-sung and his friends. Ja-sung tried to assert dominance over Woo Young too, but got embarrassed by Woo Young, who obviously had more skills in basketball than him. At that time, Woo Young remembered when they almost lost their children. Their parents had told them to abort the twins Da Jung was carrying as they were so young and still had their whole lives ahead of them. At some point, even Dae Young thought it would be better if they just gave up the babies, which deeply hurt Da Jung. But that night, when Da Jung called him and he rushed to the hospital where she was, the doctor told them that she couldn't hear the baby's heartbeat. There was nothing more painful for them than when they thought they had lost their babies. Dae Young apologized for even thinking about giving the babies up, and as if the babies could hear their cries, the doctor happily told them that the babies' heartbeats came back. That was the time that Dae Young promised that he was going to protect his children at all costs. The two of them put their dreams on hold to focus on the little family they had created. Despite the struggles they had to face, Dae Young and Da Jung stayed strong for their love and for their children. Dae Young worked different jobs to make a living so their children could grow up well. And when their children grew up, Dae Young always thought they were such sweet children. But now that he's seeing his children in a different light, Dae Young is having a hard time processing the fact that what his children are showing him is so different from how they actually are. Dae Young and Woo Young even caught Xia smoking an electric cigarette, which got them into trouble when their physical education teacher, Il Kwon, who is also Dae Young's former classmate, caught them. They got brought into the teacher's lounge, and their parents were called. That's when Da Jung saw Woo Young and was utterly confused when she saw how much Woo Young looked like Dae Young. Her confusion increased even more when she found out that Woo Young is Dok Jin's son. After the brief meeting with the teachers regarding Xia and Woo Young's smoking issues, Da Jung went back home and reprimanded Xia for smoking. Meanwhile, Dae Young was brokenhearted to realize that his children are more willing to tell and show their friends, and even him as Woo Young, all the things that they never told or showed him as their father. Meanwhile, Da Jung and her friend, A-rin, were in a nightclub when they met Il Kwon, who is also a teacher at Saram High School. The three of them talked for a while before Da Jung and A-rin left the club. While walking outside, A-rin told Da Jung to close her eyes and take 10 steps forward, and she would have to date the first man her eyes land on once she opens her eyes. Da Jung did what her friend said, but when she reached the last step she was already so close to the road and would have gotten hit if not for Woo Young, who pulled her back just in time. When Da Jung opened her eyes and saw Woo Young, she remembered the time when Dae Young did the exact same thing to her when they were still 18 years old. Da Jung and Woo Young pulled away, and moments later, Il Kwon stopped in front of them with his car, asking to drop them home. Jealous, Woo Young also asked him to drop him off. But when they reached Da Jung's home, Woo Young stepped off the car with her. That time, Da Jung got to know Woo Young a little bit and Woo Young realized how Da Jung had always held him in high regard. The next morning, while Da Jung was on a run, she remembered Dae Young and started comparing her to Woo Young. She realized something and rushed back home to find a picture of Dae Young when he was still 18. And when he saw that Dae Young and Woo Young looked exactly the same, he went to Dok Jin's house and demanded to know if Woo Young was actually Dae Young's son from another girl. Dok Jin reassured him that Woo Young is his son and that his mother just looked like Dae Young, which weirded Da Jung out. To make sure that Dok Jin was telling the truth, she called Dae Young, and Woo Young's phone, which was thankfully on silent mode, vibrated in his pocket. He rushed out of the house with the excuse that he was going to be late for school, but when he was outside, he answered the call. He reassured Da Jung that Woo Young really is Dok Jin's son before ending the call. Woo Young went to school and started another day as his children's schoolmate. Meanwhile, Da Jung was finally accepted as a JBC anchor. Woo Young did a lot of things at school with Shi-woo, like play basketball and eat out, and he also made sure to protect him from Ja-sung. They even won an outdoor basketball game together. Woo Young invited Si-woo to Dok Jin's home, and together, they watched Da Jong's first ever broadcast. They were proud to see how Da Jong perfectly handled a mishap and performed perfectly. Seeing his mother doing so well, Si-woo gathered enough courage to ask Woo Young if they could join the basketball team and play together. Hearing that, Woo Young was so happy to see his son finally coming out of his shell. After handling the mishap during the broadcast perfectly, Da Jong went viral for a while until everyone on the internet found out that she is actually the mother of 2 high school kids. They started throwing hateful comments at her and shaming her for having kids out of wedlock. Ja-sung also learned about it and started making fun of Da Jong. This angered Woo Young, who was standing by the door, and just as he was about to go to Ja-sung, he was shocked to see Ji-ho fighting Ja-sung. The 2 students were brought to the teacher's office and were reprimanded. And when they were finally allowed to leave, Shia approached Ja-sung. She told him that she was fine with him insulting her, but not when her mother was involved. Then she punched Ja-sung's guts afterward. Despite the sudden hate she was receiving due to her age, Da Jong still worked professionally. And when the JBC anchors met up with the baseball players she interviewed before for drinks, she showed her charm yet again, and everyone cheered for her. The MVP player, Ji-hoon, then requested to have Da Jong interview him, stating that he wouldn't accept anyone that wasn't Da Jong. After the team dinner with the baseball players, everyone had already left, and only Da Jong and Ji-hoon were left. Ji-hoon was showing a clear interest in Da Jong, and the 2 of them had a nice chit-chat for a while before Da Jong finally went home. On her way home, she got into trouble with 2 drunkards, but Woo Young fortunately arrived to save her. Woo Young walked Da Jong home, and before Da Jong went in the house, Woo Young told him not to worry about Xia and Si-woo, as he would protect them at all costs. One day at school, the students are in the field. When the class was about to start, she suddenly collapsed. Worried about his daughter, Woo Young quickly put Xia on his back and ran to the hospital beside the school. Da Jong, who had just finished interviewing Ji-hoon, received a call regarding Xia and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, Woo Young watched over the unconscious Xia until she regained consciousness. Moments later, Da Jong arrived after Dok Jin and Arin did. She asked Da how she was. After making sure that Xia was fine, Da Jong called Dae Young to let him know about what happened to Xia. Dae Young lied about being in Busan again and just reassured Da Jong that Xia would be fine. But Da Jong knew that Dae Young had resigned from his job, so it deeply disappointed her to know that Dae Young is purposely not showing himself up to them, even now that he knows Xia got rushed to the hospital. Da Jong berated Dae Young and told him to at least try to pretend that he cares for their children. And Dae Young was hurt to know that she thinks of him that way. On the rooftop of the hospital, Xia opened up to Ji-ho about how she feels regarding her parents' divorce. She felt bad that her mother was having a hard time because of her father, saying that her mother made the fatal mistake of marrying her father. Ji-ho wondered why Xia only hated her father, and Xia answered that it was because Dae Young was never there for her. Woo Young, who was also on the rooftop, overheard this. Woo Young was hurt after hearing what his daughter said, and he left the rooftop. What he didn't hear was Xia blaming herself for the reason her parents are getting divorced, and if she were to make a choice, she'd love for her parents to stay together. The day of the divorce came, and Da Jong planned on continuing even in the absence of Dae Young. Da Jong was seated inside the courthouse, ready to go through the process alone, when Woo Young suddenly entered the courthouse. Woo Young pretended that he was sent by Dae Young to read a letter for Da Jong. The judge allowed him, and Woo Young started reading the letter out loud. Just the night before that day, Dok Jin learned from Arin that Dae Young got so drunk during the school reunion and ended up making a scene. He screamed at Da Jong and blamed her for ruining his life. When Woo Young learned about what happened, he regretted everything that he'd done and said. Now he understands why Da Jong wants to divorce him. It was all his fault. So even though it was hurting him, Dae Young decided to accept and respect Da Jong's decision to divorce him. It was finalized, and the 2 are now officially divorced. Da Jong told her children about it, and while Si-woo toughed himself up, Xia went to the nearest karaoke place to cry her heart out. Da Jong went to work, where her boss asked if the divorce process was done, and Da Jong answered yes. Her jealous coworker, Yumi, overheard it and decided to share it on social media, resulting in Da Jong getting into another scandal. And because of this scandal, the higher-ups are worried about their image getting tarnished and wanted to fire Da Jong but couldn't, as it would also be controversial if they fired her just because of her own personal issues. Despite the problems in her work, a lot of people are still supporting Da Jong, including Ji-hoon, with whom she has been getting closer. Dae Young was jealous because of this but couldn't do anything else as Da Jong didn't know that Woo Young was actually Dae Young. So silently, in his 18-year-old form, he watched over his family and took care of them without their knowing. Dae Young knew that it was too late for him to share his honest feelings with his family and take them back, so it was fine for him to silently love them from afar as long as he could see them happy. But one day, Arin found out about him being Dae Young, thanks to Dok Jin's loud mouth. Dae Young was afraid that Arin would tell Da Jong, especially since it seems like Arin was adamant about being honest with Da Jong. But in the end, Arin still decided to help Dae Young hide his secret. Meanwhile, Woo Young and Siwoo tried out for the basketball team and the two of them were so happy when they got excited. But since they are now members of the basketball team, Il Kwon is asking to meet up with their parents to talk about them joining the team. When Da Jong learned about her son playing basketball, she was so proud and happy. So she went to attend the meeting with Il Kwon, only to realize that Il Kwon has been accepting bribes from parents so that their children can play basketball. She didn't want to pay, as it would be unfair for her son once he found out about it. He would think that his mother only bribed the coach so he could play, and therefore he would destroy his trust and stop believing in his own skills. It was the same for Dok Jin, who immediately told Woo Young about Il Kwon's dirty business. To stop Il Kwon, Da Jong decides to go to another meeting and record their conversation, which she will then reveal to everyone. But Il Kwon was clever enough to know that she was recording him, and when he caught her in the act, he decided to tell her something about Dae Young. He told Da Jong about how Dae Young came back to Sarim High sometime after Da Jong gave birth to their child. It was so he could play again, but when he was finally given a chance to join the team again, Siwoo got sick, and Dae Young chose to continue working so he could make money for his family. Da Jong cried as she realized just how much Dae Young had sacrificed for them. He also realized that Dae Young never shared his true feelings with them because he didn't want them to worry about him or because he was ashamed of himself. Just like Da Jong, Dae Young also came to a lot of realizations himself. When his mother got sick, she and Dae Young's father decided not to tell him, as they wanted him to focus on his game, knowing just how important basketball is to him. Because of this, Dae Young's mother died, and he couldn't even say goodbye to him. Seeing the broken state of his grieving son, who blamed him for not giving him enough time with his mother, Dae Young's father regretted it, and that regret he brought with him like heavy baggage he couldn't let go of. It caused a distance between him and Dae Young, and the two of them grew to hate each other. Dae Young realized that he was becoming exactly like his father, who is always nagging at his children and not caring enough about them. Dae Young became distant from his own children, and he couldn't do anything to close that distance. But now that he's back to his 18-year-old body, Dae Young can freely interact with his children and get to know them more. Woo Young and Siwoo especially got closer as the two of them played the preliminary game together. Dae Young's wish to play basketball with his son came true and they even won the game together. When Siwoo hugged Woo Young, the latter teared up as it was the first time he ever received such love from his son, albeit Siwoo didn't know he was his father. Meanwhile, Da Jong was furious at Il Kwon, who just told her that her son wouldn't be able to play in big games anymore because she didn't pay. Because of this, she decided to investigate Il Kwon to find some dirt she could use against him. Besides Da Jong, Dok Jin also helped her reveal the ugly truth about Il Kwon. They convinced the other parents to testify against Il Kwon, and they agreed, as they wanted to do it for the sake of their children. They were successful, and Il Kwon was finally arrested. Things became relatively peaceful for the family. Dae Young has been saving memories, taking care of his children, and making Da Jong as happy as Woo Young. He's been doing all the things he couldn't do as a husband and a father. The day of the festival came, and every student is enjoying their time. Xia dressed up with her friends, and Woo Young took a lot of pictures of her before sending them to Da Jong, as he once told her that he was going to take a lot of pictures of both Xia and Siwoo at school and show them to her. When a guest singer arrived and started performing on stage, Dae Young was reminded of Da Jong. He went back home and looked at all the pictures he'd taken of his children as Woo Young. Realizing that there's nothing in this world that he wants more than his family, he decided to go to Da Jong's workplace to tell her everything she needs to hear and get her back again. But when she got there, she saw her happily talking with Ji Hoon. Thinking that he didn't have any chance anymore, Dae Young decided to just leave. But that assumption was washed away when Dae Young watched the new show Da Jong was hosting. It was a show for married couples who are asking for advice on whether or not they should get a divorce. One particular couple reminded Da Jong of her and Dae Young's marriage. And there, right in front of the camera and for the whole world to see, Da Jong admitted that she regrets divorcing Dae Young. She regrets not being honest with him and not asking him to be more honest with her. If they had communicated with each other and become a lot more honest, they would have realized that they were both suffering just the same. She regrets that she and Dae Young didn't reach out to each other, because if they had, they could have fixed their marriage. That night she got drunk during team dinner, and she went to the staircase that overlooks the city below. It was her and Dae Young's special spot. She was reminded of all things related to Dae Young, and as if on cue, Woo Young came and approached her. In that moment, Woo Young couldn't help but kiss Da Jong. For the next few moments, Da Jong became attracted to Woo Young, who always reminded her of Dae Young. It was the same for Xia, who, thanks to Woo Young's actions, is remembering all the little things her father did for her. With Woo Young reminding her of her father, Xia realized that Dae Young has been a good father to her too. During an event, Xia talked to Woo Young and asked him about his feelings for her. She was relieved to know that Woo Young only sees her as a friend, and Woo Young was happy that Xia finally accepted his friendship. Moments later, Woo Young followed Da Jong to a balcony, where Da Jong admitted that Woo Young reminded her of Dae Young. She admitted that she didn't hate Dae Young and that there were a lot more things he did that she was thankful for. They looked up at the sky and saw the half moon. And the moment that Da Jong sadly wished for the other half to be okay, Woo Young knew she was talking about him. And in that moment, he couldn't help but kiss her. Da Jong was shocked and pushed Woo Young away. For the next few days, she tried to avoid Woo Young to draw a line between the two of them. One day, Woo Young discovered that Xia didn't want to go to college because she wanted to be a makeup artist. That is why Xia took a part-time job so she could save up money and achieve her dreams. Seeing how happy Xia is as she talks about becoming a makeup artist, Woo Young knew that he was willing to support her for whatever she wants to do, just as long as she's happy. It was different for Da Jong, though, when she also found out about it. Since Da Jong wasn't able to finish college and struggled a lot because of that, Da Jong was scared that her daughter might go through the same things she did too. But that night, when she talked to Xia and realized just how much Xia wanted to become a makeup artist, Da Jong admitted what she was feeling and told Xia that she supported her no matter what. The next day at school, Woo Young approached Xia and handed her a savings account book, stating that Xia's father wanted him to give it to her. Xia read it and realized that those savings were for all the things Xia did and Dae Young recorded, such as the day Xia took her first step, the first time Xia called him daddy, the day Xia learned how to ride a bicycle, or the day that Xia made a scarf for him. Xia cried as she realized she was wrong when she thought that her father was never there for her, because he was there in every step she made. That night, Xia quit her part-time job and went back home. She sat in front of their house and called her father. Finally admitting that she missed her father made Xia cry even more. Hearing his daughter cry, Dae Young called Da Jong to meet up. When Da Jong arrived, he admitted that he, Woo Young, was actually Dae Young. But Da Jong didn't believe him and thought he was crazy. Uncomfortable with Dae Young's confession, Da Jong even advised Shiwoo to avoid Woo Young. But Shiwoo refused to do so. He admitted to his mother that he got bullied at school, and Woo Young was the one who protected him from his bullies and encouraged him to be braver. As the time passed, Da Jong kept on seeing and hearing things from Woo Young that she knew only Dae Young should know. And that's when she was finally convinced that Woo Young was indeed telling the truth. The two of them started dating again, like they were back in their teens. But they soon came to the realization that they couldn't be together as long as Dae Young was still in his 18-year-old body. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon discovered something about Dae Young. He asked Da Jong to meet up so he could tell her what he found out. There, he revealed that when his brother got into an accident with his daughter, So-yeon, whom he started taking care of when his brother died, someone had actually saved So-yeon. If it wasn't for that person who took So-yeon out of the crashed car, So-yeon would have died alongside his father. That person who saved So-yeon was none other than Dae Young. Ji-hoon also revealed that he called Dae Young to ask why he didn't accept the reward money he wanted to give him for saving So-yeon. Dae Young answered that he saved So-yeon because she reminded him of his own daughter. Hearing that, Da Jong was hurt and guilty that their divorce had forced Dae Young to be away from his children. Da Jong remembered Dae Young's love for basketball and realized that Dae Young would have been a successful basketball player now if she hadn't just told him about her pregnancy 18 years ago. These thoughts pushed Da Jong to break up again with Dae Young, as she thinks that Dae Young is way too good for her. Because of this, Dae Young went back to the court during the night, shooting hoops and wishing for him to go back to his older self. But nothing happened, and Dae Young fell to his knees, crying and begging for his life to come back. When the day of the game began, it was deja vu for Dae Young as he, once again, chose Da Jong. And this time, Dae Young knew that he would never regret it. Da Jong cried as she thought she was ruining Dae Young's dreams again, but Dae Young told her that he was willing to let go of basketball again if it meant having his family back. He confessed that his love for Da Jong and their children is beyond measure, and nothing, not even basketball, can compare. At that moment, his appearance changed, and he is now back to his older self. Woo Young was gone, and Dae Young is back. Da Jong hugged him, and the two of them shared a kiss. Afterward, Dae Young and Da Jong went to Sarim High to watch the game. They noticed that Sarim High was losing and Shiwoo was out of focus. Dae Young yelled for Shiwoo to notice him, and the son was surprised to see him. Seeing his father, Siwoo approached his teammates and urged them to play better, as it was the first time his father had come to watch him play and he wanted to win for him. With newfound courage, the team started playing to their best abilities, and when the time was already nearing its end, Siwoo did a three-pointer and did his father's signature move. The ball went in, and Sarim Hai won. Siwoo didn't waste any more time and went to hug his father. Shia had just finished taking a makeup artist license exam when two girls approached her and started picking on her. One girl pushed her, but Shia moved away and caused the girl to fall. The girl's father rushed to his father and berated Shia. Dae Young arrived a while later and embarrassed the girl's father for picking his daughter's side even though everyone saw that she was the one at fault. Once the girl and her father left, Shia cried as she hugged her father. Afterward, the family went to eat together. Dae Young and Da Jong asked their children if they would like to be a family once again. It was a dream come true for Shia and Siwoo, who couldn't help but cry in happiness. 2 years later, Da Jong's career was successful and Dae Young started coaching kids basketball. Shia and Siwoo are both in a healthy relationship. One day, Dae Young took Da Jong to Sarim High School's basketball court. He asked Da Jong to marry her if the ball got into the hoops, and it did. It was now their wedding day, and all their loved ones attended and witnessed as Dae Young and Da Jong shared their vows once again. In the ending scene of the Korean drama, the couple walked down the long road surrounded by trees with smiles on their faces as they basked in their happily ever after.